We are recording live from St Andrews College, Cause Library in Grahamstown, South Africa. We have been given the opportunity to interview our headmaster, Mr Thompson, on his reading experiences this afternoon. So, why do you think we should encourage reading at the school?
So reading does a whole lot of things. It's a genuine escape into a fantasy world that you would never experience if you were not in the imaginative space of a book. It is a way of interacting with history in a way that brings history to life. And while you're doing all of that, and you're getting all of the joy of reading, you're actually learning to write, and you're learning to express, and you're learning to articulate sentences in a way you just absorb it through the process. And so it's a beautiful thing to do in its own right, imagination spreading, but it's a great way to learn your language.
So if I may ask, what book are you currently reading?
I started with a man called Ove. I read Beartown, and I've just started what I picked up in the airport the other day. Apologies, my grandmother sends her apologies, or something like grandmother sends her regards and her apologies.
So could you share with us when your love for reading developed?
I've always enjoyed reading. I started with simple books. As a boy, I collected all of the Hardy Boys, and well, in fact, I didn't collect all the Hardy Boys. I started reading the Hardy Boys, and an uncle of mine realised that I enjoyed the Hardy Boys, and he would just send me every now and again a book. And I look back on the Hardy Boys and think it's such a simple book. Why would I have read that? But you know, you just grow and grow and grow from that. And I picked up on. I sort of go through phases with a particular writer. So I picked up on Stephen King. I was a child reading Stephen King for the first time, and just enjoyed the real fantasy value of that. So it really has built up over time, and it's one of those things that the more you do it, the better you become, and the more natural it just becomes. So I've always got a book on the go.
Thanks, sir.
So, sir, what are your views on the Reading and Watching Club?
I love the idea. I think if boys were able to develop that passion for reading and are encouraged to do that and are encouraged to find books, the nice thing about books is that there are as many books as there are people, there are many tastes as there are people. So as a way of getting boys enthused around reading and to develop just that love of coming up with a book somewhere, it's a life skill that is going to stand them in such good stead. I'm more of a reader than a watcher, so I'll always read the book instead of watching the movie. But using the combination of the two as one to lead to the other. I know there's a sticker to Cleasby books that says always read the book first, but using the medium of film to bring stories alive is just as good a way of getting boys to to love stories.
And what impact do you think the Reading and Watching Club will have on boys?
Well, it's a known fact boys don't read enough worldwide. It's a known fact that boys lag in learning because they don't read enough. And it's a known fact that the more they read, the better they do, the better they're able to imagine things and express themselves, and the better their tools for expressing themselves in a biology exam, for example.
Yeah.
So on that level, it's a useful means to an end, but in terms of just picking up a book and being taken into a world they didn't even know existed until they started that book, it's a great way just to relax and just enrich life.
And where do you see the Reading and Watching Club going in the near future?
Well, I would want it to be something that boys can get passionate about. I love the idea of somehow boys sharing stories about books that they've read and enthusing other boys to read. And that then develops a culture of reading, so that whenever there's a moment of downtime somewhere, there's a boy reading a book. That's the dream. And I think it's like just showing them what the good is there, because it's an inherently a good thing.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Done? Thank you.
What ideas do you think the club should introduce to their pupils so that they could be more interested in reading?
So, books always capture a story, and you inspire people to read by getting them inspired in a story. So, talking about fiction is a beautiful way to get people to read, but you can even get them talking about their life story. I'm wading my way through Winston Churchill's history of the First World War as a way of understanding my own family history, who were out there in those trenches fighting. And those are books, they're old books that were lying around, so you can pick up the most extraordinary stories out of the most unlikely places. And the inspiration to read is through just finding a hook. So books are plentiful, there's stories all over the place. I think your job in inspiring boys is just give them the hook to make them, if they talk to them about soccer, there's a book somewhere that's going to get them going. Talk to these boys about rugby, and they'll read. You just have to hook them.
So, looking at the economic standard and matric results due from previous years, do you think reading could really improve their style of literature to other people, or the fundamental understanding of literature and academics?
So I know to be a fact, if we had more boys reading, our matric results would be better. There's no question about it. And the sooner we get them reading, the better. So part of the problem is not getting boys to start reading at age 16 and age 17, it's at age 6, when, in fact it's before that. It's when they're tiny little babies and you're reading to them as parents. That gives them the love of the story, and slowly they pick up the love of reading themselves. And there is no doubt in my mind.
Technology is taking over. So, do you prefer a handwritten book or someone read online?
I don't mind. I read some things on my iPad. I've got the Kindle app and I read there. I prefer paper books. So I've gone through the iPad sort of phase and I'm back to paper, but that's my personal preference. What I do think is dangerous is boys who think they're reading when they're actually not. So you sit online and you're watching a bit of News 24 and you're skimming back to Facebook and you've spent an hour and a lot of words have gone through your head, but your head is empty, it's like a vacuum, because you haven't had that imagination sparked, you haven't had the flow of a story. And if you can get into that flow, it doesn't matter how you get in there. Online book, if that's what hooks a young child to read because they like technology, use it. That's what it's there for.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So what are your favorite books? What do you enjoy reading? Is it fiction, non-fiction, adventure books?
I love fiction. I like books like John Irving that create characters that are like nobody I'll ever meet. I'll never meet a character from a John Irving book. They're just really interesting characters who stories are real, but there's an element of the fantastical in them at the same time. So I enjoy fiction. I enjoy getting into the flow of fiction. I tend to, I read a lot of war fiction and war non-fiction actually. So I like reading First World War, Second World War histories, both in the fictional and the non-fictional. And I love old cars, and so I read a lot about old cars. If I'm picking up non-fiction, it could be something around old cars, war and that sort of stuff.
Do you think there should be more competitions such as the iPad, the extreme reading competition to help create awareness for the reading and watching club?
I do. I thought that was very effective, and I just loved the images of people reading, and it got people talking about people reading, and hopefully got people reading. And like most things in life, you can never assume your message is going to just get to where it wants to get. You have to actually put your message where you want it to be found, and to do that you capture people's imaginations, and so that worked really well, and I think you should do lots more of that, and think of new, different ways of doing it too.
On behalf of the Reading and Watching Club, thank you for coming here and answering our questions.
Thank you, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.